Okay, so I want to thank everybody for being here today. Um, this is going to be, I think, a sort of a really regular occasion. We've got a lot, I'm sure, that people do want to talk about. And so I want to be here to talk about it. And so I'm thinking that we're going to be doing this on an extremely regular, possibly weekly basis. So more and more people can actually start to interact. I don't want to speechify too much. I can be long-winded. And so I'm going to tone that down. And I'm going to focus on answering some questions. But first, I want to talk about what this town hall, this initial town hall in this series, is for. This is sort of a general introduction. This is a series of questions that are completely unrelated to other questions. We got a bunch of questions in advance. I got them today, so I'm not prepared with a whole bunch of data, but I do want to provide as much as I possibly can. But this is sort of a more general intro to this town hall series, and we're going to be going through a wide variety of questions, both from the previously received questions and any questions that you might have here today. So some of the things I may not be able to answer for a variety of reasons. Either I don't have the information directly with me right now, or there are other reasons why I might not be able to answer you, whether it's something related to a development deal that I can't get into details about, or some sort of legal issue that I can't get into details about for that reason. And those are the sorts of things that I will let you know exactly why we can't get into more detail about something. So I was going to start with the list. But before I do that, I'm going to let all of you know what the categories of questions were, that these were collected and put into categories. And I'll tell you, we've got 9 categories, and I think maybe I'll go through them and then maybe we can decide which category we're going to discuss first, okay? All right, so the first is vape shop regulation. There were a couple questions on that. Second category is traffic calming measures. And I want to introduce Colette Klingscale, Director of Public Works. She's here graciously tonight. Thank you for being here, Director. And so I might be relying on you for some more detail about that too. So third category, predatory parking enforcement. Fourth category, police dash and body camera use. Number 5, apartment complex code violations. Number 6, Livable Neighborhoods Initiative and zoning questions. Number 7, environmental sustainability and climate action. Welcome. Have a seat. Number 8, city administrator vacancy. And number 9, addressing anti-Arab and anti-Muslim racism. All right, so out of those 9, any thoughts about which ones we should start with? Code violations, apartment building code violations, that kind of thing? Okay. Anybody have a problem with that? We can start there and keep it moving?
That's a good thing to start with.
All right. So I'll read the questions that were submitted, and then if anybody has any other questions, we can get to those as well. So what is being done to address persistent health and code violations at the apartment complexes at Quilliams and Noble? And then I think a corollary is, why hasn't a permanent solution been enforced despite repeated reports? I think that's a good one. So without the absolute specifics of the complaints and the violations in front of me, and I might be able to pull those up while I talk, I can talk sort of in a bit more generality about the process of reporting these violations and why sometimes that reporting process and that enforcement process is intensely frustrating, not just for you, the residents, but also for me as a resident and for me as a mayor and the people who work in our code compliance division. So when there is a violation reported at an apartment building, a single family home, something, we have to go through a particular process, a legal process, where we notify the building owner about the violation, and we do an inspection and verify that the report of that violation is correct. We notify the building owner, and we are obligated by law to provide a time period, a reasonable time for that property owner to correct the violation. And so what we do is we issue the violation notice, we placard it, at the residence or the building, and we also send it to the tax mailing address that we have on file or the agent of record that we have on file. And so we provide an opportunity for that building owner to correct the problem. In certain instances, there are really major issues that we've experienced. So a building in late December and the heat goes out. And we've got residents in that building who are dealing with sometimes freezing temperatures in a building. And anybody who is renting space to a person for them to live in is obligated by law to provide a habitable space. And that includes some pretty specific guidelines about things like temperature, potable water, and those sorts of things. And if they are not being provided by that landlord, then they shouldn't be allowed to rent the space. That's a basic foundational thing. Where it gets complicated is what the city can do to enforce it and the impact that those actions can have, certainly on the landlord, that's one piece of it, but on the tenants. So we've had situations where building heat has gone out, the building owner is maybe trying to fix the problem. Maybe it's taking a long time, not due to their fault, but sometimes maybe it's taking a long time because they're negligent and they don't care. But either way, in those circumstances, one of the major powers that we have as a city is to simply declare the building uninhabitable, placard it, and force everybody out. That's the enforcement mechanism. Other than that, we violate them, we take them to court. Ultimately, it goes through our municipal court system. The judge makes a determination. Everybody can review what the judge's results are, the rulings are for any individual case. If you want to, housing court, you can go watch that as well. But ultimately, the most powerful thing that the city can do is to simply force all of the tenants out of the building and shut the building down. We've been reluctant to do that. And the reason is because of the sort of Pyrrhic victory that we would be creating, where we are doing a great deal more harm potentially to the tenants than we are in some other way that or doing harm to the landlord. And beyond that, we don't have a lot of levers to pull. We can continue to violate them. We can continue to submit those violations to housing court, and then we wait for those rulings to take place. And yeah. So two things. One, they should be. Any person who makes a complaint should receive that two-way communication. I don't want to pretend like I am involved in every single communication, so I don't want to guarantee that in every instance we are doing exactly what we should be doing. But yes, that is the idea, is that the people who make the complaints should be getting communication about how those things are proceeding. So that's one piece of it. But also, when we do those violations, when we placard a building or something like that, we are providing those notices at the location as well. And so the people should be able to see them every time they come back to their building. And so, yes, the idea is yes. Whether or not that is happening in every single instance, I can't necessarily say with 100% certainty. Yeah. So this is something that we do advise people of every single time. Well, I do every single time it comes up. And I encourage and make sure that when I can, everybody involved in that process is making people aware that they can go to the court, because this is another function of the court, of the municipal court. You have to go to the court, and there is a process that the Cleveland Heights Municipal Court can take you through to put your rent in escrow. And so I advise everyone two things. Whenever issues with landlords come up, two things I advise them. Talk to Legal Aid, Legal Aid Society of Greater Cleveland, in order to get some advice and understand what your rights are. And the second thing I do is advise them to go to the court and investigate how exactly to put your rent in escrow so that your landlord has an incentive to correct whatever violations there exist, or respond to your concerns about the property. So those are two things. Yes, you can do that. The city itself doesn't perform that action. The city administration doesn't, but that's a function of the courts as well. Any other questions? Yeah.
Just real quick, has anybody ever looked at how many out-of-state owners we have in the city of Cleveland Heights?
Yes. Yeah. We've done a number of analyses of that. And over time it changes, obviously. And one thing that we find, especially with the sort of corporate owned or LLC owned buildings, is that they routinely change ownership, and they do it for a couple different reasons. One, they do it because they know that since our violation enforcement mechanism is a portion of our criminal code, when they switch ownership to a new LLC, when they transfer it to a new LLC, we have to go through the process again. We have to perfect service of the violation. We have to basically start the process over with the new owner. Now, this is something that could be fixed. And I'll go back a little bit and do a history lesson about legislation in Cleveland Heights. And I'll tell you, I'm going to editorialize a little bit while we talk about this, because there's a lot of frustration about this process that I have. So over the years, we've understood that this is a problem that we have to address in some way. Several years ago, Melody Joy Hart, former councilwoman, former council president in Cleveland Heights, started working on changing the enforcement mechanism, the code violation system, to allow for two different ways to enforce. The first is the one that we already have, the criminal code. When you get taken to housing court, it's a criminal offense. You're getting taken to housing court for a criminal offense. She wanted to add a civil option that the city could pursue. Now, with the civil option, we basically start the enforcement process as a civil offense. So it's not a criminal offense that has a different sort of set of processes. And if an LLC owns that property and we go the civil route, what we'll find is that if they try to transfer it, we can just update the case and add the new LLC's name, and they're responsible for everything that they just transferred. So unfortunately, this is a relatively major shift in policy. And this is sort of a legislative function, a purely legislative function to add this kind of functionality. Council has over the years expressed a priority in housing code enforcement, and those sorts of things, but we haven't seen that translated into actual action and getting that thing done. I suppose the administration could take all of it. There are a wide variety of things, and we're going to talk about some more of them. A wide variety of initiatives, legislative initiatives that the administration could try to take on as well. But I think all of you know that part of the reason why we have a new system of government, part of the reason why there is so much frustration in this community, is not just because of legislative need for change, but also because we have been underinvesting in our administration, in our facilities, in our equipment for a very long time, and getting those things in order is a massive undertaking. So, the administrative work of a mayor is enough. And so I have asked on multiple occasions through several at this point iterations of council that they would please take up these things, civil option being one of them. Unfortunately, Melody Hart she wasn't successful in retaining her seat in 2023. And so, she had a particular push to try to get this change made. And I don't know if she just didn't have enough support on council to make it a priority. But certainly once she left, nobody really picked it back up. But this is something that I encourage all of you to reach out to City Council and say, hey, this is something that could help us enforce. I think that, I've also encouraged council to take a look at our penalties for these code violations, especially when it comes to, and specifically when it comes to rental properties, because we've got really great landlords out there who, care about their properties, care about the community, whether or not they live here, and then there are some others that are less responsible. And if we had, an increased set of penalties that we could rely on, we might be able to incentivize better behavior. So all of these things are sort of a really core legislative function to change our code. And so I do want everybody to, in an ongoing way, encourage your city council to focus on those things that directly impact our community. But that going back to specifically what's going on for these particular properties here as well. Now, we created a property investigator position in Cleveland Heights in our housing code compliance division. And that property investigator is sort of an augmented position. It's a housing inspector, sort of not on steroids, but somebody who really researches the ownership of properties, somebody who puts together an analysis of problem properties, and but we still have to go through the legal process of providing them the violation, allowing them some time to correct it if they can, and if they don't, then we have to take them to housing court. And that's been the process. It hasn't changed. So even though we have information about certain buildings or areas or even landlords that are maybe habitually problematic, we still have to take them through the same process every single time. The courts have the option to put an owner on sort of a community monitoring penalty. You saw it, Ray Pianca really spearheaded this in Cleveland, and I'm thinking that it's possible that we can, expand that into Cleveland Heights in a more robust way, but that's up to the judge as well, to take a property owner who maybe owns this property that's before him, in housing court, and recognize that that property owner also controls some other properties, either through directly through the same LLC or directly as a person, and those other properties may be problematic as well. The judge can treat those properties as a group and treat that particular property owner as someone who is responsible for all of the problem properties that they own and not just look at it on a one-off basis. The other way to do it, again, is through a legislative change where we can talk about additional infractions and a sort of a inflation in penalty as more issues come to light or more violations, more properties that are problematic. But again, that's something, when we're enforcing, we can only enforce up to the ability that the legislation allows us. Sorry, yeah. I'm done. I want.
What about other violations such as grossly overgrown grass, vacant lots? Like, for example, where I live in
You know what?
every year.
I think we've got the camera, and I just realized I was talking on the camera, and the people who were asking questions were not. So I think, is it?
On?
Yeah, it looks
Okay.
like it's on.
All right. So, and this has been ongoing for many, many years, but those lots at the eastern end are all private owned lots. And well, just over the last 2 years, it's really been a struggle to try to get them to cut the grass or whatever. And myself as a homeowner, I would be cited if I had, as I say, grossly overgrown. It's like my height. Yeah. And So, and it's a safety issue. It's a health issue.
Yes, indeed.
You know, and it's a security issue and all that. And last year, you know, everybody like uh, Hebrew Academy said they cut their part, and then Cleveland Heights, you know, but you know, it's just been in years before I know Cleveland Heights would just cut it and I guess build them.
Mm-hmm.
But this year it looks so horrible, and I called the action
Okay.
about it, and they said that the case was completed or closed or something. They said that doesn't mean that the issue is taken care of. It just means that it's going through a process or something like that.
Yeah.
So
I can address that. I can
Yeah.
address that.
So I'm
Okay.
really concerned about that because the aesthetics of, you know, we all keep our grass cut there. We are homeowners that have been there for many, many, many years. And it just seems like it's gross neglect, you know, that we don't care what that looks like down there because we know that would never take place in certain other areas of Cleveland Heights. So what about those kinds of things?
Okay, so talking about these kinds of problems, one of the ways that, well, a couple of the ways that we've been trying to address that is first by increasing the number of inspectors that we have on staff. I don't know that a lot of people know this, but when I came into office, I think maybe we had 4 inspectors, 4 housing inspectors or something like that, which is a ridiculously low number of people to have on staff to do this work. Got, you know, 17, 18, 19,000 parcels in Cleveland Heights. And, you know, especially after the foreclosure crisis and the need to do more work to make sure that we are shoring up our property conditions and values, we didn't have enough people. To the point where we couldn't even do all of the housing inspections, the point of sale inspections that we have on the books that we need to do in order to allow people to transfer properties, we had to farm those out. We had to outsource that particular service to a company called SafeBuilt. We had already outsourced our building permitting and inspections to SafeBuilt already, and so we had reduced staffing for years and years, either through attrition, some because, and I'll be candid, some because there was some misbehavior in our housing inspections as well, and so some people think maybe were close to getting prosecuted. I think didn't get prosecuted, but were either terminated or retired or something like that. But there was some misbehavior as well that needed to be addressed, but also budget cutting. Which had taken place for a decade, basically. Yeah. Well, no, it's the same people. It's the same inspection. So that's the thing. Yeah. Yeah. So our code compliance division deals with all of these code violations. So tall grass, weed, noxious weeds, if the gutter's falling off of a house, if, you know, all the windows are broken and, you know, animals are getting in, all of those violations are dealt with by the same division. That's the code compliance division. And again, in that, we used to call it the housing department. We never really had a housing department. It was always a division of another department. But that code compliance division had 4 inspectors in it, and we started hiring. So we've got a lot more people on the ground doing the work now, but I think there's still some more work to do there to make sure that we're doing it as efficiently as possible. I'm not saying we're doing it perfectly now, but I will say this. Another reason that we were having trouble is that our wages weren't right-sized. We weren't paying people in that division enough. And we've made some changes there recently in order to both retain, because we were going to be losing people this year if we didn't make some changes. There were people who were looking elsewhere for a variety of reasons. There were people that we couldn't recruit, both because, well, there was some uncertainty at the beginning of the year about what funding levels were going to be, but also our wages have not been up to standard. And so, but we raised wages. And we're hoping that we can continue to see progress. And I think we are seeing progress in terms of the work that they're able to do already. Doesn't mean we're perfect, but it's the same group of people. So adding more staff is a way that we are trying to address that. Some of the difficulty when you send something to the Mayor's Action Center, Access Cleveland Heights, the app, so that goes through for housing inspections, for code violations, that goes through sort of two systems. The Access Cleveland Heights app so that we can track all of the complaints from all of the sources. But then for code compliance, it has to go into another system as well called CitizenServe. Now, CitizenServe is a program that we started implementing back before the change in government. This was when I was working full-time for the county. The county sort of funded some implementation costs for CitizenServe in order to allow multiple cities to implement this solution, which, it used to be, everything used to be done on paper. Tracking these things was ridiculous. But CitizenServe has helped us to centralize those complaints and hopefully make it more efficient. But that's where you see when somebody submits a complaint in Access Cleveland Heights, it then gets submitted into CitizenServe, and that's where the Access Cleveland Heights piece stops, and then it continues in CitizenServe where they go out to the property, they verify the code violation, they issue the violation, they input it into CitizenServe with a date certain where it's supposed to be re-inspected, and that is supposed to be corrected by then, or they have to move to the next step and ultimately send somebody to housing court if they don't correct it. Now, when it comes to tall grass, though, we do it in two ways. The first way is we have grass cutters on staff, but we've also got 23 acres of medians in the city. We've got ball fields and properties, and we don't have enough staff cutting. We used to cut our medians with 10 people. We've got 2. And part of that is because our wages are too low. We're trying to fix that now. But my point is, ramping all of those things up will take care of a lot of this. But the other way that we do it is we contract out for grass cutting services, and then we bill the property owner for that nuisance abatement. And we either get the money back from them or we put it on the tax duplicate. And then when they, pay their property taxes, they also have to pay that. And if they don't, ultimately can go into tax foreclosure, and the city, although this isn't a desired outcome, the city may take the property as a result of those unpaid fees. The other thing that I actually introduced when I was a council member was that if you have a rental property and you've got unpaid nuisance abatement fees or unpaid property taxes, you cannot renew your rental occupancy permit. I think historically, and probably even now, and this is something that I think we need to shore up when it comes to consistency, those renewals, they shouldn't move forward unless those things are paid. But there may be some that fall through the cracks and just sort of get pushed along, and that's a problem. That's something we have to fix. But when it comes to those nuisance properties, getting those people out to cut that grass, the contractors or city staff, sometimes they get overloaded, especially in the sort of early months of summer, late spring, when the grass is really, really growing. They can get overloaded. This year, it was a little bit more tough just because of, contracting was a bit more complicated because we didn't have a year-long budget until March 17th. So but you're absolutely right. We need to do better at that. And frankly, having a system where we are trying to track these things, CitizenServe is going to be helpful for this primarily. Track these things from complaint to resolution, actual resolution, and knowing what that resolution is, and then doing a deep dive into the analytics of those cases to see how long does it take for us to get out there and get the grass cut. And in that way, we can figure out how we can do better. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, it's twofold. I'm going to follow up with her because wasn't there an initiative to try to get people to grow grass? Okay, and so I'm hearing two things. I mean, how do you encourage people to let their grass grow, but yet, if it's a complaint, how do you handle both?
Okay, so no
And
more
I
may.
do have another question.
Okay. No mo may, I've said it several times at this point. That was a flawed idea, and that's my bad. What I was hoping for, it was, but it was flawed. But it was flawed, and so the what I was hoping for with No Mo May was to encourage people who would intentionally try to grow something, not just sort of clear cut everything, have, monoculture, grass, lawn, but to encourage people to intentionally do something different with their yards. That was the goal. It wasn't just to have tall grass. Tall grass doesn't really help anything. But if you allow other things to grow, if you've got a lawn that isn't just grass, if you've got a lawn that, has a variety of other native plants in it and that kind of thing, allowing that to sort of sprout and see what it is and that sort of thing. The goal really was to encourage us doing something more creative than just a crop that, it's the most prevalent crop in America and we use it for nothing, for the most part. Sometimes we play tennis on it, right? But my point is, that sort of thing, trying to encourage doing something different with your lawn. But it was flawed in conception, flawed in its rollout, and that's my fault. The next year I tried to do something a little bit different because tall grass is not what we're going for here. Mm-hmm. What we're going for is a reduction in the need to put water on the dirt, a reduction in the need to put fumes into the atmosphere and noise in our ears with our lawnmowers. If you grow clover, you don't need to water it as much. If you have creeping thyme, you don't need to mow it. And those sorts of things are what we were trying to encourage. And what we wanted to do with No Mo May was to tell people who were intentionally doing something creative and specific that we wouldn't enforce certain things quite as strictly. But if you had a vacant house, and even that year when we started No Mo May, if you had a vacant house, we were still violating it. If you just let your grass grow and it was clear that this was not something being done intentionally, my inspectors had instructions to, violate those people. So we didn't stop violating, the tall grass complaints and that kind of thing. We just had sort of a second step where it was like, does this look like they're trying to do something else? Maybe we can inquire, was the idea.
Gotcha.
But your second question.
Second question, Cain Park.
Yeah.
And are there any visuals to show how this started? And secondly, was the community brought into where to actually, weigh in? And I'm speaking specifically about myself.
Okay.
My house is right across the street. I have no buffer anymore. So when all those trees, those 100-year-plus trees were taken down, it's wide open now. And what I've read, I haven't seen any drawings. I've tried to see if there are any drawings to show what's to come. And no one throughout the city seems to know, or if I try to contact, I can't get anybody. So I have no idea what's coming, but I do know that 100-year trees aren't going to happen overnight. I do know that the landscaping and everything that acted as a buffer for people coming right up the hill, for noise and everything right into my front yard is gone. And now what's left, my understanding is a tiered concrete amphitheater style seating and ramping to address. So I'm just curious, one, two, how can I improve my house value now that's gone down?
Well, okay. I don't know that I can get into the specifics of home value fluctuation and how the improvements in the park will address those things. And I'll say, a lot of times, people have an expectation about what a particular development or change will do to their property values. And people can be very concerned about that, and I understand. You know, we can't predict the future. We don't know exactly how a change is going to impact those things. What I will say is that in Cain Park, for one, we engaged because we needed to, because there were some major problems with how the city of Cleveland Heights addresses our population of people who might have mobility issues, who might have a problem accessing certain amenities that we provide in the city. And we were being sort of threatened in certain ways by the potential for litigation about some of those things. And we're a relatively old city. We're a legacy suburb. And a lot of our amenities were built well before, Cain Park is one of them, well before the ADA, for example. And so when you come in to Cain Park from Lee Road, relatively easy, flat way to get in. You come in, you can, get to the amphitheater, you can get to the Alma relatively easily, even if you have mobility issues, if you're using a wheelchair, walker, something like that. But if you're coming in from Taylor, you've got this massive slope on one side next to the synagogue. On the other side, same issue. The slope is completely out of compliance with the ADA. And, I engaged with an ADA compliance consultant. We hired somebody. And this was to sort of find where our issues were in the city, both in our facilities, in our parks, in a variety of things. And we did this analysis of where we needed to improve in order to be in compliance, in order to allow for accessibility for people who might not otherwise be able to enjoy these things. Cain Park was a notable example. If you've got real mobility issues, it is very difficult to safely, especially in the winter, to get into Cain Park from Taylor. And we can't ask people to walk all the way down Superior or, in their wheelchair, go all the way down Superior to Lee to then come back up into Cain Park, especially if they're going to watch a tennis match or, something like that. It's just not feasible, and it's not okay to do that to people. So in conjunction with a really important and, I think, transformational idea for the Taylor Business District, both with the historic rehabilitation of the Taylor Tudor buildings, and then across the street, hopefully a business revitalization program that really transforms that business district. There was also this idea, and I don't know how specific I want to be in calling out the person who brought this idea to the city of Cleveland Heights. He's here today in the room, but part of that idea was, how do you connect Cain Park to the business district and the neighborhood around it on Taylor? How do you get people who might be, so we went, absolutely, yeah. So we went through a really, really long process, and this has been a years-long process to get to the point where we're actually doing construction right now. We've had multiple community meetings and public meetings in the council. We even went to the school board and had public meetings there to discuss. Well, there are drawings, and you bring up a good point, because the initial drawings were one thing. So I don't know if you remember this term. It was a stramp, stairs and a ramp, right? A combination of things. And the initial renderings, before we started doing the more detailed engineering studies and that kind of thing, had most of that construction taking place on the sort of northern end of the Taylor Road entrance to Cain Park, on the north of the sledding hill. What we found after we started doing some more digging, I guess, is that the topography of that particular location meant that if we were to restrict it to that side, what we would find is a huge, massive sea of concrete that would impose itself on the sledding hill, that would force us to move the basketball courts. completely take down pretty much all of the trees on the synagogue side of the park in order to do this. So we had to make some changes. And we made those changes and submitted those to council, had some public meetings about that. Now, right now, actually, since construction started, I've been trying to prepare some of these documents for a more public release, but this is what we got right now in the way of some.
Is this on the website?
Not yet, not yet, but it will be. I might do it myself. But so, well, okay, but I'll tell you, the trees being gone is a temporary thing. We will be replanting. No, we recognize that. Absolutely, and sometimes it won't be in mine either. But sometimes we plant the trees that we expect other people to enjoy the shade of. And in this case, we had dual purpose. Now, we did publicly speak about this quite a bit. And the idea is a positive one for the city of Cleveland Heights. But, yeah. Mm.
About this ramp, the ADA and all that. And to communicate with our community, it would be so much nicer.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
My bad.
May I? No, sir. I'm the communications director. Hi, my name is Francis. I'm the communications director. I am working on a social media post with the master plan for everyone to be able to see.
I can appreciate that. What you're missing is the pictures I have right now that show it gone. That is too little too late. It had to be at least 6, maybe 8 large. You're talking about 3 foot, 4 foot caliber? Well, buffering. It's not just the trees for the height. You also have the landscaping and the shrubbery. It actually serves 2 purposes, not just visual. It also is a break from the noise and stuff that would come from the sledding hill and all like that. It gives me a good buffer.
So there are 2 issues that you're bringing up, and I think I want to address both of them. One of them is the specific issue of those trees being removed in order to allow for this improvement. That was unavoidable. That was not some. If we were going to make this ADA improvement, there wasn't another way to do it. Well, the other option, I guess, would be to basically eliminate the sledding hill. That would have been the other option in order to allow for this to happen. The switchback and the sloping. Well, the issue is the topography of Cain Park. That hill is so steep that in order to be able to get into the park, if you've got mobility issues that would require the grade that we would need, you have to do a switchback or you have to have a massive amount of concrete in order to allow it to happen. And so it was those options. There were some realities on the ground that we just couldn't. So that's one issue. That's the specific issue of removing those. We were looking at maybe 10 trees to be removed over there. Now, the other issue, though, is the communications piece. And that is a long-standing and sticky issue for municipal governments, period. We've got 45,000, 44,000 maybe people in Cleveland Heights right now. And honestly, given the way the world is, given all of the information that people are being bombarded with from all levels of government, from other things, and people's own lives taking a great deal of focus, it is very difficult to get people to pay attention to a council meeting or a committee meeting or something like that. And that has been a difficult issue for municipalities all over the place. We can have 4 months of meetings about something, publicize them on our web pages. We've got our video, we're taking video of this. It's going to be on our YouTube page. You can look at our committee meetings on YouTube. But there's a lot of information that everybody's being bombarded with all the time. And it can be very difficult for a city like ours to cut through some of that in order to reach everybody, right? About the plans. Now, we started talking about these changes in Cain Park. When was that? 2022. It was 2022, actually, yeah. So we've been talking about these changes at Cain Park since 2022. That's when we engaged with WXZ in order to do the Taylor Tudor buildings and the Cain Park Village Revitalization Project. And this was a part of that discussion, and we've been talking about it since then. But one thing that we find invariably is that we can talk about it for as long as we want to. We haven't figured out how to get to the point where we are starting construction, because ultimately you got to start construction at some point. Every single time we get there, there are definitely people who are taken by surprise, and we haven't figured out how to fix that yet.
And I attended the Taylor Tudor. Never once was anything presented for the park.
We had renderings for the park as well.
But I'm saying, those multiple meetings that you're referencing, and even on your website, I tried to look and find renderings or drawings or something just to give me some idea, because I'm all for improvements, and I have no problem with that. It's just having the community engaged and somewhere where you can say, okay, go to this site, you'll see the Tudor Taylor. You'll see the redevelopment that they're looking for, but I don't see anything for Cain Park.
This is Matt Weimer. He's with WXZ. I know you guys went through a pretty.
Oh yeah, there was a ton of community engagement, and
Just put out a fucking press release.
Well,
God damn it, the week before. If you think people are gonna stand up and chain themselves to the trees, let them chain themselves to the trees, but put out a fucking press release with a drawing.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you get community day or meeting?
Well, I think Matt, the community
Yeah.
meetings and sort of the renderings and the talks.
yeah, I don't know how many community meetings. I mean, several, and it was for the streetscape improvements, the C2X district rezoning. We had multiple meetings at the Colonnade. We had visual, presentation boards lined up all around. There were several people.
I thought it was in second grade.
Why?
Put the dot on the. It was bad.
Well, this is helpful feedback. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
What? Okay.
There's also a project site on the city website, just like there is for, I think, Top of the Hill, Cedar Lee. So there's one for Cain Park Village. If you go to it, you can.
But
see
I
the
will say,
entire document.
since the change in the design since then, I don't think that we've updated that page on the website, and so that's something that we definitely need to do, and we can sort that out forthwith.
What about the development is supposed to be a beginning plan? We don't know about those and we haven't heard anything yet. Some people that were having a meeting, they did not live there, and that was a couple of years ago. Nothing has been said to neighbors that we most affected by opening up land like that.
This is another really good example. So she's talking about the Blanche Road Extension project.
We don't know anything about it.
Right. And that's this is something that there have been a couple different developments, and one of them is on this. And when I say developments, I don't necessarily mean property development or residential or commercial development. I mean sort of initiatives that the city has worked on, where we found exactly that same issue. And I had to do some pulling back of some things because we got to a particular point and then realized as much time as we've allowed to be spent on certain things and conversation and council meetings and commission meetings and so on and so forth, we still get to a point where people say, hey, wait a minute, what's going on? You're talking about changing some things in my neighborhood and I don't know about it, right? So one of those things is the Livable Neighborhoods Initiative and zoning questions that people asked about, and the places of worship legislation that would have changed zoning for people. So it's a complicated topic, you guys. And I'm trying to stay away from controversy here. But I don't think it's going to be possible. Yeah. I'd love to keep it light, but we're going to have trouble with that. And so when we talk, we got people. Yeah. Oh, okay.
Could you share what you envision as a creative
Means of community engagement.
Okay. And I'm gonna bring you the mic too.
Okay, the one I'm talking about was at the library, and it was the community initiative. And I went there not knowing what to expect. I thought what we were going to get, and the water district did something similar to this. I thought we were going to go in and we would have people talking with a question and answer period where the residents could actually interact with the people who were doing the work. Instead, I walked in and I felt like I was really in a second grade class with somebody handed me a sheet of dots and 5 or 6 choices and put the dot on your choice. And it was like, it was so ridiculous. This was at the library. And it was an initiative. Oh, this was for Streets Project. It was maybe about 10 community things. Maybe that was the traffic.
So one of the things that the planning neighborhoods and development, again, here comes some controversy. Cleveland Heights is a city of strong opinions. I've said it for a while. And one of the issues that we have in conversations about planning, especially, is what we've found is, what we used to do or what we've tried to do is have an audience of people, and we got people presenting and taking questions and interacting and that kind of thing. And what we have found over and over and over again is that there are a few people in an audience who grab the mic and yell at planning staff for a while, and sort of it inhibits actual back and forth and real exchange of information and that kind of thing. It makes it very, very difficult to actually have the kind of community conversation that we want to have that's productive, instead of, you're talking about planning a streetscape and then you got somebody yelling for 5 minutes about potholes. And yes, we need to complain about potholes, but just not right then, that kind of thing. And so that sort of, aggressive behavior has led the Planning, Neighborhoods, and Development Department to try to do things a little bit differently. So they'll, I remember on one occasion, I think maybe we were at Oxford, and they had little stations set up where it wasn't just a big crowd of people being talked to and then giving the opportunity to, questions, comments, that kind of thing, but instead little stations where information was provided and people could circulate as they wish and express their opinions in particular ways. And so the dots thing, indicating their people's preferences. I'm not a planner. I don't pretend to be. I know that is a way that people determine sort of the shape of a community's opinions about things, in the absence of sort of what can devolve into a shouting debate among a group of people. Because not everybody is going to agree on things. And, there's a difference between, okay, I get to put my dot on my preference. Somebody else gets to put a dot on a different preference that I might think is terrible. Well, we're not going to fight about it, because all we did was put some dots, and we can sort of quantify that. And so it's unusual. It's inorganic in a certain way. It doesn't feel intuitive. It's not an exchange. But I think the other piece is that follow up in these processes. We can take that information. We can create a page on our website about it. We can publicize that, and you can go and take a look at the pictures of the poster boards where people put their preferences, and you can take a look at the analysis of those things. And that's sort of the follow-up when you're trying to communicate with a large group of people and you can't have it be one-on-one with 300 people, at a time, one person at a time, sort of having that conversation. They try to shortcut it. They try to create those efficiencies in the communication so that they can get a read on what a community might want or need, what a community's preferences might be, what a community's concerns might be, without sort of having that kind of conversation diverted by the most passionate or the loudest person in the room. And that it's a really difficult needle to thread. And I don't know that we're doing it right. Obviously, we're not doing it right, right? Yeah. You had an idea too.
I had two small things. I got two small things, and I've said this before, so it's going to fall on deaf ears or something. Future Heights knows how to do this. We could partner with them, and I know we have some people in government that don't like Future Heights, but they know how to do this effectively, and it seems like a waste of our time not to work with them and have them help. Okay, so that's the one thing. Future Heights, they know how to do this. They've done it a lot, and they're really good at it. Two, the problem that we've had since I've lived here with communication with neighbors and stuff. Now, and they always say money. We put out that nice quarterly magazine. That can't be cheap, okay? So we could do that. We have everybody's address. When we have a situation like what she's talking about, okay, where it's not a citywide thing. You have a group of neighbors that are affected. What's wrong with taking a piece of paper and typing out a notice and making copies of it, stick them in an envelope and sending them, let's send them to everybody in a 4-block radius. And it ends up in the mailbox. If we could do that magazine, which is fine, then we can afford to do that. And it may seem old-fashioned, but people would get it.
Okay,
I would like to echo what she's saying. I think, I'm Gen X. I'm not on social media. Reliance on social media as your platform of communication, while it's great, should not be the only form. There needs to, especially when you have people who are directly affected, neighbors that are affected. Like she said, go back old fashioned. Put it on a piece of paper, copy it, throw it in people's mailboxes.
So two things. One, yes and. Okay, so first of all, I want to address the first point, though, Future Heights. I don't know that anybody in the government has a problem with Future Heights. I think that historically, I remember one occasion, I think it was here actually, in the big room, in the senior center, Future Heights had a massive design charrette kind of situation to discuss Severance Town Center. Now, this was back when I was on council. I think I maybe was the only person from the government who attended. I showed up, saw what they were doing, saw some interesting ideas. A lot of people from the community showed up, took a look at what was being envisioned for Severance, sort of a visioning process, I guess. And I was upset at the time that the administration didn't show up, that nobody from the administration was sent to watch. And what I heard later from the City Manager Briley, was that two things. One, she did not want people in the city of Cleveland Heights to get the impression that A, the city was involved in the design work that was being proposed, and two, that she did not want the people of Cleveland Heights to get the impression that the things that were being discussed were possible given the ownership status of the property itself. And so she avoided going to that. Now, one of the things that people have discussed about Future Heights over the years is that in the absence, maybe, and I say maybe because I don't want to disparage some of the work that our planning department has done. But in the absence of certain planning initiatives, I think Future Heights stepped into a void for some years. And they decided to take on some, at least in their minds, responsibility for planning in the city of Cleveland Heights. But that planning work that they were doing was disconnected from the actual work of the city. And I don't know that that was, well, I'll put it to you this way. Right now, we're dealing with a conversation with a group called Hatzalah. Multiple cities are attempting to come together and have a conversation with this group. They do emergency medical services. that are specifically tailored to a portion of our community, right? And we can partner with them, but if they are sort of disconnected in their own operations from the work of 911. So we're finding that they are potentially encouraging people not to call 911 immediately, or if they call Hatsala, Hatsala is not necessarily alerting emergency medical services to the issue until later, those sorts of things. It's potentially problematic, right? The planning work that Future Heights was doing, sort of taking it upon themselves to start creating plans and for various things. I think sort of, I don't want to speak for the previous administrations on this, but I think that they may have felt that the work that Future Heights was doing was sort of imposing itself. And, you know, maybe the city could take Future Heights plans and say, you know what, we're just going to slot this in, we're going to use that. I don't know what the other constraints were, and I don't want to speak for them. They can do that. You can talk to Richard Wong, talk to Tanisha Briley. But I know that there was concern about sort of this private organization deciding what the plans for Cleveland Heights were going to be instead of going through the planning department, the planning commission, you know, all of those, and the city council. Well, I don't know what planning work Future Heights is doing right now, but I'll say, and I know they've gone through some ups and downs and are figuring out what their purpose and their goals are, and I don't want to try to get in the way of that. Again, they are a private organization. I don't have a problem, and we are partnering with Future Heights on a variety of things. But when it comes to sort of that planning work, I think our primary goal as a municipality is to increase our capacity to do it in-house, to allow, you know, additional planners to be hired. We've got more people in planning doing good work. You know, Brooke and Xavier and Fallon and. Well, I'll tell you this. I think you know, I'm going to let probably at some future point maybe Eric Zamft have a conversation with you about how best to run these things. I don't want to get too far in the weeds. But the next thing about the sending things via the post, right? Yeah, seems like a great idea. Sending things through the post is a way to make sure that it gets to all of the addresses. I'll tell you though, in practice, it is surprisingly ineffective. And that's mainly because people get the mail and they throw it in the garbage. Often.
You know, I appreciate that because I'm hearing the sentiment about how difficult it is to engage.
It can be.
And
Oh,
that you can
thank
send
you, Drew.
multiple things, but what I'm hearing is at least then you've done your due diligence, right? You have done, as the city, you've done your best to communicate in a timely manner the information that needs to get sent. You're absolutely right that at some point it becomes the individual's responsibility to read what is sent to them, to peruse what is sent to them. But I think what I'm hearing is that there's issues with timeliness. There's issues with getting the full information that they need. To not have updated drawings and trees being cut down and that information not being updated on the website or wherever it needed to be for those residents is, I think they have a legitimate issue there. So I think it's multiple ways to communicate. Yes, you got to look at different ways, different platforms, but at the end of the day, you're right. It is each individual's responsibility to read what is sent and what is posted, but it's also the responsibility to have the information in a timely manner and complete information.
So yes. So first of all, I think that it is a shared responsibility. I think that the government has a responsibility to do what we can do. Director Klinkscale, I think did you have something you wanted to?
Sure, I just wanted to share that. I kind of believe that because I know that everyone isn't on social media because we deal with lots of residents of all ages and some of them don't have social media. So I tried that you guys all know we're doing the Yellowstone sanitary sewer and water replacement. So we wanted to have a public meeting to let folks in that neighborhood know about what was going on, how it would affect them. And I had staff hand deliver flyers
2 blocks on one side of Yellowstone and 2 blocks on the other side of Yellowstone. I arranged for the engineers that were doing that project to come to present the project, and 2 residents showed up.
No, yeah, and so it is very difficult. So I will say I believe that it is a shared responsibility both with the government and the people that we serve to inform ourselves as well. Like by the way, you can sign up to be informed of the variety of meetings that get posted on our city calendar. You can sign up to be emailed the agendas and schedules for those meetings. I encourage you to take a look at the website in order to do that so that you can have more regular communication directly into your email inbox about that. But I also recognize that we are inundated with spam email all the time. Our email inboxes are full of this crap and things get pushed down. Believe me, I get like 3,000 emails a month. And so it can be very difficult to keep up with that too. And so all of these issues are thorny issues for us because it is very difficult. We talk about a lot of things all the time and sort of either hand delivering or putting something in the post and paying postage can be prohibitive both in terms of its cost effectiveness and its actual effectiveness in getting people informed. That doesn't mean that we should stop trying. But I will say, on a targeted approach, doing that, sending it out citywide, there are a whole heck of a lot of things that it can be, sent out for, and I don't think that we would have the resources to do that for everything that we would need to communicate. But the point about putting out a press release when something's about to happen, yes, see, that's the old one.
The updated one.
But we don't have renderings for the updated one.
Do we have a drawing of the updated one?
We do not have renderings for the update. We do have plans. We have plans drawings, but we do not have renderings.
Did it happen in a council meeting or a planning commission meeting?
I believe it happened I know we discussed it in council, talking about the updated plans for the seating area and the switchback ramp for accessibility.
Plans are, civil engineering drawings.
Yeah.
I'm sure that there's a permit set.
This is what we know, man. This is what we know. That's what we know.
Yeah.
So what's
Those are the
happening-
original
what we
renderings.
were so excited about this morning,
Mm-hmm.
when you texted, I thought, Matt doesn't understand that that is not good news for the people who are across the street, because they didn't see it coming. They don't know what's happening, because they just weren't made aware that the massive amount of cement that was gonna be over there back in 2022 has changed over the course of years with no update to all those trees in front of your house are gonna be mowed down this month. And they didn't know. And I'll tell you what, I would be running out there in my nightgown, waving my arms to.
Well, I'll tell you, this is not on Matt.
Okay.
No,
Yeah, yeah. This,
we never saw the change, Matt, so that
Yeah.
you understand.
Sure.
I know you're doing a good thing.
Thank
and
you.
so, but I want to make something else clear too. So when we look at, and I will be putting this, I've converted the PDFs, massive PDF files of plans to I think JPEGs or PNGs to be able to post them. But the plans that we're looking at now, the construction that you're seeing doesn't, I think, accurately indicate what the actual concrete in that area is going to be. So we tried to minimize the amount of impervious surface by doing the switchback instead of just the stramp on the northern portion of the park. But the switchback will sort of be a winding path in a gradual slope, and where you see the topography, that topography is going to be, permeable surface, going to be landscaped. And so what you're seeing right now is not the final version. All of the sort of the smoothed out ground that you see is not all going to be concrete. I want to make that clear. Yeah. For the
I mean, it really, in terms of visual communication, what was done at Peace Park, I think, was a home run. And if you were to look at that over the past 2 years and what they showed visually into what reality is, I mean, spot on. So I guess I would just suggest people to look at that as a great role model.
It's a good idea.
And just follow suit.
Appreciate it. Thank you. And I think, one of the issues, like, obviously the library is a very different animal than a municipal government. And I won't pretend like the context in which we're working doesn't have an impact on how well we're doing this job as well. So over the course of, the last, 6-8 months, things have been interesting in Cleveland Heights. And I think that does have an impact as well, because there's a lot of distraction that is frankly creating a lot of noise. And so we can even have a meeting about a change in the design. But if people are focused on other things that are not central to the work that we're actually doing when it comes to city government, that meeting doesn't cut through. Nobody's listening. But that's something that we have to deal with, and we have to recognize it. And so, if we're, making mistakes in that, then we have to recognize that and attempt to do better. I think when it comes to these design changes, though, we didn't develop like new renderings. We didn't, create some sort of visual exploration of what the end result is going to be. We were focused on taking the concepts that we knew we needed to implement, which is accessibility into the park from that location, and the maintenance of sort of a seating area for more of a connection with the business district, so that if somebody is at a cafe in one of the newly renovated Taylor Tudor buildings or something like that, they can just step outside, they can go sit on the steps, watch some kids play, have some hot chocolate from a hot chocolate and coffee car or something like, or truck or something like that, and hang out and watch the kids sled, those sorts of things. We knew we needed to do that, and we needed the engineering, and we needed to get it done quickly as well. And because these were ARPA dollars, and we needed to make sure that we had these things funded. I'm going to go back here, and then we'll come back up. No.
I have several questions, but this lady has been raising her hand repeatedly and has not been called on. Did you want to speak?
Oh, yeah, Alice, I'm so sorry. Yeah.
Supporter, but I have to say, I'm generally a supporter, but I have to say, I've rarely gotten a response anytime I've asked for any information from your office. And even though I wanted to do positive articles for the Observer, I just can't get a response on a really simple request. So what's going on with, like, you have a lot of staff, but they aren't responding to public inquiry, even on really simple requests?
Well, you know what? And this, I think, is a part of this sort of new direction when it comes to more active communication that we're trying to do now. I'll tell you, the part of the frustration about being a mayor, being very busy doing that job, is that often people look at you being very busy and they say, oh, he's too busy, I'm not going to bother him with this thing. And so I'm, going from meeting to meeting, I'm sitting down to sign a bunch of contracts, I'm doing all of this stuff, and I have people on staff who have told me, and I've tried to convince them to bug me anyway, even if I'm busy, who have expressed to me, I see you, you're so busy, I didn't want to bother you. And it's not just the busy part. Sometimes people are just scared to give you bad news as well. Very recently, I complimented our new finance director for being extremely willing to give me bad news, because I need to hear the bad news. If I'm not informed about the bad news, that's a problem, because then I find out about it 6 months later, and then I'm busy again because I'm trying to fix something that could have been prevented. And so that's problematic. And frankly, for the next mayor, I'm not sure exactly what advice to give to fix that. But this town hall is an example of where that issue that you would like to speak about, I'd like to hear about.
Is there a policy that people have to ask your permission to give general information?
Absolutely not.
So, like if I was asking for just some feedback on how the mower exchange went the last 2 years and whether there was going to be another one. I wanted to write a positive article for the issue of the Observer that was focused on lawn care and that sort of thing. And I wanted to write a positive article, but nobody would respond to my request. I sent 3 just asking even for a statement. It didn't have to come from you. It could have been just some statements from people who were the recipients of the exchange. I couldn't get anything. Just for a simple positive article. Same thing on an article for the Climate Action Plan. No response. Just nothing.
Okay, well, that is disappointing to hear. So first of all, you have my apologies. And no, we don't have some sort of policy where people can't respond with basic information or anything like that. One of the things that I've tried to encourage among my staff is that when there is some sort of substantive discussion that involves multiple departments, and many things do, it can be problematic, it can be inaccurate if, let's say, for instance, you ask a patrol officer about the, policies in the police department. That patrol officer might give you an answer. But in all likelihood, that patrol officer maybe doesn't know everything about the policies that impact the question that you're asked. And that's a more substantive, sort of more complicated conversation to have. And so those things, what I've requested that people do is talk to directors. If there's something that I need to address, I'm happy to. But for basic information, for even data about like the for instance, the last lawnmower exchange, how many did we give out? How did that work? That kind of thing. Those sorts of things shouldn't be terribly difficult to provide. But again, I think I'm hoping that sort of with a new direction in communications, we can be a little bit more energetic and aggressive about that kind of thing as well.
10 minutes, Mayor.
Are they really going to kick us out?
No. It was 8:30, wasn't it? Was it 8:30? Yeah, 8:30.
Okay, well, let's do
Let's
8.
keep it going.
Okay, let's keep it going. I have a question. Oh, wait, she has, yeah. And then you've got one. Okay. So we're going to go to you, then you, then you.
I think a lot of us are looking for some concrete answers. And you mentioned that we have an increase in housing inspectors. How many more do we have? You've talked about the process for housing complaints or compliance complaints. I have lived next to a totally trashed house and have been complaining for 2 years. Why is there not just a piece of literature that says, here's how the process works, instead of me making repeated phone calls to housing, to council members, to the Mayor's Action Center, and getting pushed off every single time. Oh, we're working on it. Oh, it's in process. Oh, that's going to housing court. There could be one simple sheet of paper that says, here's how many chances an out-of-state landlord gets before they go to housing court. I mean, what's going on? Why can't we get a simple explanation? And how many housing inspectors do we have?
Sure. So let me pull up an email to see if I can find the answer to that question and be precise. The second thing is that other question that you just asked about why can't we get a simple piece of literature that says this is how many chances an out-of-state investor gets before we send them to housing court. The reason we can't have a simple answer to that is because it's not a simple answer. And in part because we don't get to decide what the result of being sent to housing court actually is for any particular landowner or property owner. But the other piece is that each situation is individual. And so somebody who is going to be required to do a roof tear off is going to be a very different set of circumstances than somebody who is going to be required to, I don't know, repair a gutter that's falling off of the house. So those things, and that'll be dramatically different than the 10-unit apartment building where all of the pipes have burst. And okay, sure, okay, all right, thank you. All right, so that's part of the reason why these conversations can be difficult, is because sometimes these things don't have a simple answer and it's a case by case. And so giving us sort of the permanent parcel number or the address of a property, we can give you information about where that particular property is in the process. If there's been a violation issued, I can pull it up on CitizenServe right now. I can show you all the permits they've pulled. I can show you the violations that they have. I can show you when those things were given to the property owner, how much time that particular property has until a reinspection will let them know. But that's a case by case. And so we can't give you necessarily some, specific answer for multiple cases. You can look it up on CitizenServe too. That's another reason why we started implementing that. Now, in order to do so, you have to create an account, I believe, on CitizenServe, which you can do going through our website in our housing department in order to get to CitizenServe and set up that account. And once you do, you can do research on your own to put in the address or the parcel number for that property, and you can see that a violation has been issued. You can see when they're expected to come back and do a reinspection, when that violation is supposed to be corrected. You can take a look at what permits have been pulled by a contractor doing work on a neighboring property and that kind of thing. Oh, 14. Okay, so we went from 4 to 14 inspectors. We also, and this is something that I'm especially proud of right now, and it's probably going to seem like a small thing. We have people in the office who do a great deal of work in code compliance. And historically, they've been classed as office assistants. And so they're not, going out into the field and doing the inspection reports, but what they are doing is they're taking in these complaints, they're helping to schedule people, they're scheduling point of sale, inspections. They're doing a great deal of work, and each of them has been specialized in certain ways, but they're cross-training each other, but they've been classed as office assistants. And one of the things that I did recently was reclass these employees based on what they're actually doing and increase their salaries to reflect the work that they're actually doing and the contribution that they're providing. And so they're basically housing specialists now. We changed them into a new class of employment in the city, and because they contribute as well. So we've got these 3 housing specialists that are working, and then 14 housing inspectors as well. And we also have, and I don't know if that 14, I'll have to double check. Does it include Dexter and okay, so then we've also got a housing inspector who is specifically tasked to housing court as well. And we've got that property investigator that I mentioned earlier, who does more of a deep dive into the ownership and issues with various properties.
Against out of state or out of country people who own properties here in Cleveland Heights.
Yeah, it's problematic. So when that's where the civil idea makes sense. So in this case, our code was created probably before we saw this prevalence of LLCs and sort of the corporate takeover of what used to be, yeah, I mean, ultimately things were a lot more local. The progress of our economy has led to something different. And that makes it especially difficult for what I think of as an antiquated enforcement mechanism to address. You know, and like I said, the inefficiencies of the criminal housing violation process means that people can skirt these laws over and over again by creating a new LLC and transferring a property to it. And over and over again, you can do that, and we have to start over. And this is why the legislative action is so necessary.
Each time they sell LLC to the next. When a property is moved from one LLC, the Khalil LLC to the CJ LLC, is there a point of sale?
Technically, there is supposed to be when a property is transferred. Although I think there are probably some ways to get around that too that we find. I know sometimes people will transfer the LLC from ownership to ownership. Now that doesn't change the issue with the violation, the criminal violation or anything like that. I'm gonna, yeah. So if the LLC stays the same and the violation is against the LLC, then that doesn't adjust that. But I'm trying to think. Please, yeah.
If Cleveland Heights became known that if a property transfers and the county cannot say that this is a quitclaim deed, taking it from, Khalil and Natalie to the Khalil and Natalie Trust, right? There's certain transactions. Otherwise, if you want to sell your property, you got to have title insurance. You got to go through the whole process, point of sale. And I don't know if you're old enough to remember this, but Cleveland Heights used to have a reputation under Martin Lentz. Okay, some of us are old enough to remember Martin Lentz. You could not get in the city with a tag light out at night, period. You would be pulled over and ticketed many times. I thought I wasn't going to be able to get home because we were keeping Cleveland out. And maybe in terms of law enforcement, I mean, I think all are welcome and that's cool. But if we manage to put a point of sale in between every transaction that's not, forming it into a trust, it'd be serious.
So this is where surprising constraints jump in and make things difficult. So there are certain things that we can very easily be challenged in court about. One of those things has to do with the right that people have, that people are given, and when I say people under our system, that includes a lot more than just humans, yeah. But the rights that we've decided as a society that entities have to contract with each other, to do what they will with their property in certain ways. So one of the things that we've attempted to do as a more local community is to impose certain requirements on the transfer of properties, right? But the transfer is mandated by state law to take place at the county level. Whether or not any local requirements are fulfilled, the transfer takes place and the county is required by state law, even if the county has a requirement, they can't impose that requirement in a way that inhibits the actual transfer. I know, but when I was working for the county, we were trying to address a particular issue that I can't for the life of me remember right now. But we found ourselves constrained by state law that required that the county affect the transfer. Yeah. Yeah. So yes, we can have our point of sale. Part of the issue with point of sale in Cleveland Heights in recent years, relative to how we used to do it, and what people remember about Cleveland Heights' reputation for being extremely strict about these things, a major portion of that was that the workload dramatically increased as a result of 2008
Oh, for the city.
for the city, and the staffing went down as a result of 2008. And so there was this mismatch in terms of capacity and the work that needed to be done, to the point where we were outsourcing our point of sale to a company that, you know, I'm not going to.
Takes 20%, doesn't give it.
Well, yeah, I'm gonna let you say that.
I said that.
But that's been an issue with, and it's a continuing issue. We are, again, with 14 inspectors as opposed to 4. We're in better shape now. That doesn't mean that things are perfect, though. But we've been talking a lot about housing code violations, and there's a lot more to talk about. But is there anything else that somebody might want to bring up?
Just one thing.
The housing inspectors, when they come around, my information is that they can only do it from the sidewalk. They do not go into the yard.
A little bit more complicated than that. So, unless they have permission to enter a property, they can, when they're doing an inspection, it's what they can see plain view, right? They can request permission either to go into the backyard or to enter the property. See you, Director. Or to, you know, enter the property to investigate something. But again, and this is something that many people don't know, we called it our housing department for a very long time. It was actually a division of our Department of Public Safety. And so what our inspectors can do is basically get a warrant to enter a property if there is a reason to do so. They would get a warrant for entry to inspect a property, especially if there is a health or safety hazard that needs to be addressed. Then in that case, we have emergency powers where we can go in to protect the health and safety of the people or the neighbors in order to address something. The other thing that inspectors can do, let's say you've got a next door neighbor who in the backyard, there is some major problem that needs to be addressed, right? Well, maybe the inspector can't see it from the street, right? But you can let them into your backyard, and maybe they can see it from your backyard, or even, you know, if you can see it from your second floor window, you know, you can invite them in. Yeah, invite them in and say, hey, this is the issue. You can see it from here. They don't have to necessarily enter the subject property in order to be able to confirm the violation in the complaint. So that would be the way that an inspector, if they don't have permission to enter that property and they can't justify a warrant for entry, then that would be a way that we could get around those things and sort of see it plain view.
So did you want to get into the recall at this meeting, or do you want to save that for the next time?
I mean, I'd love to never get into the recall, but so I don't know.
I mean, I have a specific question if you want to start dealing with those things.
If you anything anybody wants to ask, feel free.
Yeah, well, it's good to hear you talking. You sound like a mayor to me, and it's good to hear about the nuts and bolts because in this recall, we don't hear anything about your record as actually mayor and what you've done. all we hear about, basically to me, is anti-Semitism has become this enormous issue. And at the other council meeting, someone suggested that the city investigate anti-Semitism and possibly adopt the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. And I just wondered that, the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism equates Zionism with Jews, and it equates criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism. And since this has been such an issue in this recall, I just wondered if you wanted to address that tonight.
Yes, sure. Again, when I ran for this position, this was not something that I expected to have to address at all. But, I focus primarily on the local issues that we deal with and sort of the functional issues of governing and performing the services and improving them over time. But this has become a particular issue in Cleveland Heights, specifically, locally. And, we all remember October 7, 2023, relatively massive attack in Israel. And, as a community with a relatively large Jewish population, there was a connection here where, I know that I and council felt a need to respond to something that we might otherwise not normally respond to as local officials, right? Now, that doesn't mean that we responded perfectly. I remember sending an email to Council President Hart when she was proposing a particular piece of legislation, a resolution in support of Israel against a terrorist attack, right? And what I told her in that email was that whatever language she chooses, we need to be careful not to wind up co-signing on absolutely anything that a nation state might do in response to that kind of attack. Because we don't get to determine what any other nation state does. We don't get to determine whether or not they violate international law. We don't, and so sort of preemptively supporting anything that any country does, including our own country, is, in my view, ill-advised. But we made a statement, and I attempted to couch my statement in support for an allied country that had experienced a terrorist attack. And my support was in the defense against terrorism. And I tried to be specific about that because I know that any country can tend toward excess in violence when it comes to responding to attack from any direction. I don't know that I got it right. And I won't pretend like I'm the authority on these things either. And what we've seen since then has been devastating. And when we were called upon to do so, and when we were informed that what we had resolved as a community, as a government, was incomplete, maybe, at the very least, or short-sighted at the very least, I attempted to clarify. And I don't know that I did a perfect job at that either, but what I wanted to communicate to everybody listening was that, first, there is never an excuse that justifies killing kids. And to me, that's a universal. We're not seeing an adherence to that particular principle right now. And to me, that's absolutely devastating. I think I said, I was quoting James Baldwin, you know, and I'm not going to be able to perfectly quote it right now, but, you know, there is no other people's children. I don't know who said that, but it's the same concept. All the children are all of our children. And most recently, when I've been accused of being anti-Semitic, hating Jewish people, my family the same, being accused, and I'll maintain false accusation. It took me a little while because, frankly, I'm not a politician in that way, that I can just immediately have some statement to provide about something so difficult to deal with emotionally. But provided a statement, and again, that statement was not perfect, and none of my statements ever will be, I'm sure. But in that statement, you know, after listening to a wide variety of people express their hurt, their perspectives, and one of the individuals who came to a council meeting where this was discussed mentioned the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, and I didn't know what it was. And that was something that I needed to look into. And so I read it. And when you read the words on a page and you interpret them from your own context, you're not necessarily getting all of the context. And so in that statement, I mentioned that, you know, that definition makes sense to me. You know, the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. And one of the reasons why it made sense to me was because there was a caveat there that it depends on the context. You know, the examples depend on the context. So, for instance, criticism of Israel for the horrific things that they're doing to the children of Gaza right now. You know, no children should starve to death. No children should die for lack of medical attention. Criticism of that can be anti-Semitic if you're not going to criticize some other country for doing the same damn thing, right? And that was the context that I was reading the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism in. Because if some other country is doing the same thing and I don't have a problem with it here, but I've got a problem with it here, then that might be because I've got something against Jewish people and I conflate Israel with Jewish people or something like that. And so in reading it, just thinking about my context, not thinking about how other people will apply it or interpret it, my immediate thought was, okay, yeah, like if you add nuance, if you add context, if this isn't something that is just boilerplate, then okay, I can see how that might, because there was a lot of language that was couched in this might be anti-Semitic if, you know. I think this is a much larger discussion that we are all really scared to have. Because
Not me.
Not you, absolutely not you. And you know what? I'm a lot less scared to have it now too, because I'm willing to recognize some of my ignorance and inexperience in these concepts. You know, so I know that, like I said in that statement, I know that I'm subject to being in culture, you know, in this culture, raised in this culture. And so racial and ethnic biases we're steeped in it for our entire lives. And so I know that I'm subject to those things. I know that I'm subject to mistaking stereotype for fact. I know that. What I also recognize is that we can overdo certain things in an attempt to quash dissent against, you know, a whole host of horrors. And so what I think has been relayed to me that I think we should all take seriously is that, yeah, we don't accept anti-Semitism. In ourselves, we need to think about how we view people, think about whether or not we're viewing a group of people in a particular way that doesn't apply to every individual in that group. We need to think about whether or not the stereotypes that we have in our minds are actually true or not. We need to think about whether or not we are sort of in our minds collectively punishing a group for the actions of a person or a government or something like that. But we also need to recognize that when a person is criticized, or if a government of a foreign nation is criticized, that is not the same as the hatred of a people. And I know Israel is not the Jewish people. That's not a possibility. You know, it's simply not, it can't be true, because a people is not a country. You know, and so, again, this is going to be a difficult conversation, especially probably in the city of Cleveland Heights, for us to have. But I think universally throughout America, it's a really hard discussion for us to have. Right now, there are people who are being threatened with deportation simply for speaking out against, you know, people being starved.
There you go.
You know, right, and that's extremely problematic for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is free speech, not the least of which is this idea that we could possibly place the concept of a country or a government above humanity. Humanity is always going to be more important. At least it should be. And so that's it's going to be a tough discussion to have, and so that's what I like. If you're talking about the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, I would love to have an open, candid conversation about what people think it means. Because when I read it, I thought it meant a particular thing, and then I had some conversation.
The problem is that the definition is sort of abstract. And then there are the contemporary examples.
Yep.
And one of the examples is criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic. And so we have a state government which is either has or is going to, or I'm not even sure where that stands now. But to accept this definition of anti-Semitism allows a government to, for example, put different penalties on a hate crime, to actually have real consequences in life. So to me, this is so dangerous. I can't emphasize how dangerous it is.
Well, I want to respond to this. And so this is where, when I read those contemporary examples, at least the version that I was able to find, this is where the nuance came in to my mind, and how I was interpreting it was, how I read it was, criticism of Israel can be anti-Semitic if that same criticism would not be lobbed at a different country that is performing the same act. So for instance, if I am very happy to criticize Israel for doing X, but then Saudi does it and I don't have a problem with it, what's the difference? So that could be something that is motivated by anti-Jewish bias, right? Could be. That's how I read it, because probably that's how I read things.
There are no Saudi IHRA type of definitions for anti-Saudi bias, or Russian, or any other country. But
You need to specify what some ism is. There's, as far as I understand, there's no legal definition of racism, anti-Semitism, or any of the rest of these things. It's not codified, so we end up with like Potter Stewart and pornography. I
You know when you see it, yeah.
And that's why the IHRA definition is important, because they want to, in a sense, codify what it means to be anti-Semitic.
Yeah. So yeah, I think this is one of those conversations that I think deserves its own, maybe town hall, but yeah, maybe we'll get some food. Yeah. Yeah, we can, and you know what? Maybe we can bring in a bunch of diverse cultural food items and try to come together in that way too. But I will say this: I think that it is a discussion worth having, and I think that unfortunately, what we are seeing right now, both in this community and nationwide, is an attempt to stop this discussion from being had in an open, honest, in certain respects, non-confrontational way. I mean, sometimes confrontation is necessary. Sometimes you have to, confront an idea. But a lot of the energy around this and the aggression around this means that people shut down, means that conversation shuts down. And people like me, who really don't have a history in any of these concepts, I don't get to learn more because the conversation is a shouting match. And trying to shut people down and restrict people's speech in the criticism of some foreign nation, I think is a ridiculous thing to do. I think it's un-American. But I'll tell you this, I also recognize that, for instance, we've got a bunch of different allies around the world. We provide aid to those allies, and I think it is our responsibility as a country to ensure that the aid that we provide doesn't go to acts that are in violation of our principles here in America.
Well, how about international law?
Or international law. But it goes further than that. And this is not, and in my view, this is not restricted to Israel. It is any country. Our funds as the people of America shouldn't go toward our own countries, our own government's actions that are in violation of our principles. But we don't see that. That's not something that, it would be good to start that once in our history. But this is the thing. The conflation, the blanket conflation of criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism, I think is, first of all, absurd. And second of all, I think it is extremely harmful, both physically harmful to people who are being hurt right now, but also harmful in the long term for our continued or I don't know, any possibility of credibility as a moral authority in the world.
And it's also creating more.
Well, and that's the thing. I don't, like I said, I can see how that could occur. I could see how that could contribute to, anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic, feelings and thoughts, and that's scary to me too. And there's a local element to this, and I want to just, I think we'll probably have to close pretty soon. I've got people who need to go home, but you know what? One of the things that somebody here talked about was the Blanche Avenue Extension project. There's been, and like on the list of questions, many of which we didn't get to. There was a conversation about the livable cities, the neighborhood places of worship zoning legislation that I introduced and then withdrew and told people to go back to the drawing board and fix some things that I thought were really problematic from a zoning and property use perspective. And then reintroduced a highly modified version, went through a process, and then realized that there were a lot of people in the community who were extremely upset about the concept and had not had a great deal of opportunity to investigate it and talk about it and contribute their opinions about it. And so I withdrew it again, right? One of the things, almost done, one of the things that I noted on the local level is that there were a lot of people in the community who were concerned that this was being done in an effort to benefit a particular segment of our community to the exclusion of other people, even though this was a piece of legislation that was universal, citywide, not something that was specific to any area of our city or any population within our city, there were still people who looked at this and saw it as favoritism. I've seen this kind of example multiple times throughout my tenure as mayor. Hearing about people concerned that law enforcement pays special attention to particular areas and particular people. Some of those things are explained by the fact that an off-duty police officer is often hired by Hebrew Academy to provide security, and so it looks like the city is funding some sort of special treatment, right? When really it's something that anybody can do. We can, the off-duty officers, they've got these side jobs. Sometimes they go to a bar or restaurant or a store and they perform these things. But when you see it visibly in a neighborhood, people make assumptions. And that's where the open conversation can help, because people don't know that. But we're too scared to have the conversation, and so it festers in secret. And that's sort of the local level of not having this conversation, leading to potentially more anti-Jewish bias, more anti-Semitism, because we're not willing to have the honest discussion. Now, at the international level, we're talking about the potential for the United States of America contributing to ethnic cleansing through our tax dollars, through our international aid, and not being able to have that conversation not only is devastating on the acute level, in that we are continuing to, help people drop 500-pound bombs on kids. But the other piece of it is that without the conversation, without sort of examining what we're doing, then we are potentially increasing the level of anti-Jewish hatred and anti-Semitism, and that is also a devastating impact. So I think we need to have another conversation about this. All right, well, I want to thank everybody who is still here for coming, and all the people who left early. That's fine. Well, not early, but for all the people who came, I appreciate your presence. I'm hoping to have more conversations like this in the future. So thank you all for coming.